Hi, I'm Denelle from Denelle Realtors. I'm here with Matt Maynard from URI. He's a psychology major and he's helping us out with a few projects. As we were looking into the projects, we realized that representation was something that's not really well understood by the general public. So Matt's going to ask me a couple questions and hopefully you'll have a better understanding of how it works.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Dale, could you explain agency briefly?
Yeah, so agency is basically who represents whom in a transaction. So who represents your best interests, if any? So that you might be involved in a transaction that no one is representing your interest and you're basically on your own, or you might have full representation.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit more about the history of the Rhode Island agency laws?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Matt, because I've been in the business for about 25 years and there have been many changes. One of the big changes was, so 25 years ago, we as realtors only represented sellers. So we never represented buyers, which was really uncomfortable. You'd be sitting at a closing table and a lot of times your clients didn't know that you didn't represent them because you were getting paid by the seller's proceeds. So a dispute would come up at the closing table and your buyer would be looking at you like, help me out, and you'd had to say, well, I represent the seller, I can't represent you in this particular. So, to better protect consumers, the state came out and said, we're going to allow buyer's brokerage, and then they changed the law again where we could allow buyers brokers on an inter-firm basis. And what I mean by that is if one of my colleagues here at Denelle Realtors has a listing, I can still represent a buyer and their best interests, which used to not be the case. So my colleague will have their own file, their own confidential information that they don't share throughout the office with their clients, and I can then come in and represent a buyer in their best interests. So the law really has developed nicely, to protect consumers, and it's good stuff.
It's a big improvement then.
Yeah, very much so.
All right. How does the buyer or seller know who represents them?
Another great question, Matt. What we have is a form that I happen to have right here, and it's a mandatory real estate disclosure form. And a realtor is required to have this signed by you at your first meeting with him, your first face-to-face basically, or at least before an offer is presented. And then the realtor should explain the different ways that you can be represented. So there's a neutral transaction facilitator, which basically doesn't represent your best interest, and he's just helping you with the process. This doesn't happen very often because most clients want to be represented. And then there's a designated client representative. So this is what happens most of the time. I will take a listing and I represent the seller's best interests. And the same thing can happen with a buyer. So if I am working with a buyer, I become a designated buyer's representative. Every once in a while, you'll get a situation where, if I have a listing and a buyer comes directly to me and they don't necessarily need to be represented, I have to treat them honestly and fairly, of course, and then I can go back to my seller and ask if I can become a neutral dual facilitator. So I don't represent anybody's best interest, but I don't share any confidential information between the parties. So if there were negotiations going on, I could relay the different offers and the counter offers back and forth, but I wouldn't be able to give my opinion of what they should as a neutral dual facilitators. So this form, this mandatory form, is important, and it explains everything, and any realtor that you're working with should explain it clearly. this is the form that the Realtors should present to you.
Okay, Dale, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, just that, to make sure that you're being represented and your best interests are being taken care of. Make sure your Realtor explains it to you. I'd be happy to explain it further. You can reach me at dale@denelle.com or 401-783-7777 and talk to any of our professionals here. And we'll take good care of you. We will represent your best interest. Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much for doing this for us.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
This is going to take a long time at this rate.